Okay, Mr. Mayor, we are now live. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will call this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. Is there any add-ons to our agenda here today? Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one this evening. We'd like to add an update regarding the announced stay-at-home order today by the province. We'd like to add that to new business.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can you hear me, Madam Clerk? Yeah, okay. Sorry. My internet seems to be cutting in and out, so be prepared. I have a recommendation here that the agenda be approved as presented. Could I have someone to move, put it on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor Colburn, second by Councillor Pringle. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Sutherland and Councillor Thompson are absent. Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton is absent, and Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our agenda, declaration of pecuniary interest. You can declare any time you see fit during the meeting. We're down to our next recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on March 17th, 2021 be adopted. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Barfoot, second by Councillor Colburn. Is there any discussion on this motion before us? Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Sutherland and Thompson are absent. Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Mayor Sue Carlton is absent, and Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on, our next recommendation is that the minutes of the special council meeting held on March 24th, 2021 be adopted. Someone to move, put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Pringle, second by Councillor Barfoot. Any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Sutherland and Councillor Thompson are absent. Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton is absent, and Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. We're down to announcements. I have one announcement I would like to read. Members of the public are invited to participate in a public survey regarding motorized vehicle access at Sotacrity Heights Water Access Point. The survey will remain open for public feedback until April 26, 2021. A public meeting has been scheduled for May 5th, 2021 regarding the same. All participants will be limited to electronic means by telephone or video conference or by submitting written correspondence to the attention of council. Should any member of the public wish to participate, please register with the clerk. The survey is on our website. And again, the survey will remain open for the public feedback until April 26, 2021. It's just an announcement we'd like to put out there. Moving on for agenda, Councillor Colburn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to clarify, so folks who are wanting to provide feedback regarding that issue at Sotacrity Heights are being asked to register with our clerk. but they can complete the survey anonymously online. So I wonder if at some point, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to our CAO, I wonder if we might give some consideration to how we use online surveys in the future, and perhaps asking staff to look at situations in which we might want people's names and addresses so that we know we're getting comments from relevant individuals who have some kind of relationship to the issue at hand. I wonder if that's something we could consider down the road a bit. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Any comments, Mr. CEO?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's something we are certainly taking into consideration. As a matter of fact, at our management meeting tomorrow, we are on our agenda is to look at additional opportunities for additional engagement with our residents through surveys, through direct phone calls, through the direct mail, and how we're going to actually get that feedback. I know that there's some privacy hurdles that we need to go over if someone wants to put something in anonymously, but it's something that we're looking at for sure, and we will be bringing something back to council shortly on how we're going to increase our communication with our residents bilaterally, both us going out and residents sharing their feedback as well, and validating that those comments are, I don't want to say legitimate sources, but from our ratepayers.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, and Councillor Coburn. I'm hopefully you understand. Okay. So we're moving off our agenda. We're down to public hearings. We have none. Presentations. Wesley Wilson, Ontario Barns presentation. I will now welcome Mr. Wesley Wilson of the Ontario Barns Preservations. Mr. Wilson, go ahead. You have the floor. You're muted.
Of course, that gets me every time. All righty. So hello all. I'd like to start by thanking Mr. Mayor and Council for allowing me the opportunity to speak before you all today. My name is Wesley Wilson, and before I begin, I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce myself. I live in Norfolk County, where I'm a descendant of the founding UEL families, where my family has farmed for over 200 years, conserving the original barn that was built on the property that we were granted when first coming to Canada. I am actively involved in several professional organizations, including ICOMOS, which is the International Committee of Monuments and Sites, being the Canadian representative, along with Ontario Barn Preservation, the Architectural Conservancy of Ontario, Canadian Society for Civil Engineering, along with the Norfolk Historical Society and the Delhi District Chamber of Commerce. Currently, I'm finishing my degree in Architectural Conservation Engineering at Carleton University. And I'm here before you today representing Ontario Barn Preservation, which I'm the District 12 representative, along with being the policy and advocacy portfolio being under my jurisdiction. And as part of what we're doing is we're doing a series of deputations to engage municipal councils across the provinces. We're a provincial body. And what we're advocating for is to alter the surplus regulations for farm dwellings, for the severance policies, to avoid unnecessary demolition of rural agricultural structures. And now at this time, I would ask, I believe the clerk has the video on hand to play the video that explains all of our policy positions and explains the slide deck that you have before you today as well. I'm not able to hear the audio from the video, so I don't know if that's on my end or on your folks' end as well.
I cannot hear it either. Wesley?
Apologies, that's my mistake. Just bear with me for 1 second. We'll try this again.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to
How's that?
We can hear it now.
speak to you today. My name is Krista Halsoff, and I'm the Vice President of Ontario Barn Preservation. Ontario Barn Preservation is a not-for-profit started in 2019 to advocate for our heritage barns. We do not advocate for mandatory preservation, but encourage voluntary preservation, reuse, and restoration where possible, and provide the resources to support those who are interested. You can check out all our initiatives at ontariobarnpreservation.com. The provincial policy's view on heritage barns is that significant built heritage resources and significant cultural heritage landscapes shall be conserved. We believe that preserving barns is an important part of this goal. Although our heritage barns may not have the same functionality they once did, we believe that they are an important part of Ontario's cultural history and rural landscape. They provide landmarks in the countryside and our rural scenery. They have the potential to be reused and repurposed. They're value-added opportunities for agritourism. The reuse of buildings is more environmentally friendly than use of native new materials. They have historic value for research of vernacular architecture and cultural history. They convey an important sentiment to our urban counterparts about the hardworking farm community. They're useful for small farm operations, and they contribute to the rural economic growth and development of our areas. Recently, we became aware that the surplus farm dwelling severance policy was causing the unnecessary demolition of our heritage barns. We researched with municipalities, planners, architects, and engineering some of the key policies from the provincial policy statement, OMAFRA, zoning, official plans, and Ontario Building Code regulations, which were creating difficulties in the conservation of our barns. And this is the Coles Notes version of that letter. The first policy item that we felt was most detrimental to our barns was the minimum distance separation. So we felt that barns retained on the farmhouse lot were the best solution. When done this way, the barn is already in compliance with minimum distance regulations, and the owners of these small farm lots for barns see the barn as a novel asset rather than an obsolete liability. These small farm owners are also interested in hobby farming, adaptive reuse, preservations, starter farms, CSAs, farm gates, and estate residential. So we feel that barns severed on the retained farmhouse lot have the greatest chance of success and preservation. Where a barn is retained on the agricultural lot, the large piece, it is in immediate violation of the minimum distance separation requirements, as the related farmhouse is now on a separate property. Due to the unsuitability of these barns to house animals, equipment effectively, most farm owners would be willing to tear it down, and there is a lack of interest in preservation. Some of the solutions we found to this problem were retaining the barn on the farmhouse lot with limits on animal capacity or areas, zonings that state that lots must comply with the OMAFRA manure management guidelines, or retaining the barn on the farmhouse lot and making it unreasonably capable of housing animals. The next policy item that we felt was most detrimental to our heritage barns comes from the provincial policy statement, which states that a new lot will be limited to a minimum size needed to accommodate the use and appropriate sewage and water services. This small lot and restrictive guideline almost always forces the barn to be retained on the large agricultural lot, and thus, as I explained, nearly guarantees its demise. Some solutions we found from municipalities were using a minimum and maximum lot size rather than the above strict guidelines. They were reviewing each severance on a case-by-case basis to determine the best collection of buildings, and they provided language to consider heritage buildings, landscape features, and other site assessments for the severance. Some municipalities also did a reasonable use assessment to ensure that the lot was adequately sized for future septic systems. The next policy item that we found challenging was the designation of non-farm use. We feel that the non-farm designation of these small residential lots creates conflict of uses in prime agriculture lands and encourages non-farm residents to purchase these properties that can lead to neighbor conflicts. Where farm uses, including livestock, are permitted on these small lots, it encourages farming owners, barn reuse, farm startups, CSAs, etc., that contribute to rural revitalization, as well as a better chance of success for our heritage barns. The last policy item we found challenging was the mandatory change of use for buildings to not permit livestock. So where a barn needs to be proven not to be used for livestock housing, OMAFRA distinguishes a building capable of housing animals as one with water and stalls. By removing these items from a heritage barn, it can be proved to be an accessory or shed building rather than livestock housing, exempting it from the minimum distance separation requirements and the nutrient management plans. Note that the Ontario Building Code does not distinguish the difference between an agriculture shed building or an agriculture livestock building. It only distinguishes between agriculture building and Part 9 small buildings or Part 3 large buildings. Doing a mandatory change of use from agriculture into these other categories, Part 9 or Part 3, are usually financially challenging and not feasible for most barn owners. We would suggest that wording be more clear in the zoning bylaw and not left open to interpretation by the current building officials or building code or OMAFRA guidelines. And I'd like to leave you with this quote. It is possible that millions now living in North America have never seen a barn, let alone been in one. In the foreseeable future, there's more than a possibility that for many, the kind of barn illustrated in these pages will not be there to see. Too often we see these community-raised historic structures in poor condition with loose boards flapping in the wind, roofs caved in, or just the massive timbers decaying into the ground. We realize that not all of the barns can be saved, but on behalf of Ontario Barn Preservation, we would encourage you to help find ways to prevent the further unnecessary demolition of our heritage barns, especially in relation to the surplus farm dwelling severances. It is our hope that barns of significant cultural heritage and value are conserved for future generations. Thank you very much. I'd ask if there's questions, but I'm not here to answer them, but please feel free to forward them to info@Ontario Barn Preservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clerk. And I'd just like to close by saying that I'd like to thank everyone for their time in our presentation here today. And if you have any questions on what has been presented in the slide package or through the video within your agenda package there, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you, Wesley. Does council have any questions of Wesley? See, Councillor Colburn, go ahead.
I guess maybe not a question, but thank you, Mr. Wilson, for coming here and speaking with us. I did not know such an organization existed. And having grown up on a family farm with one of these old barns, I find it all very intriguing and important. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to our senior management team, I wonder if we could add this to our list of things to consider when we move forward with our culture and heritage committee work, hopefully later this year or early next year.
Thank you, Councillor Colburn. Does council have any other comments or questions? I have a comment for you, Wesley. Have you presented this to the upper tier, the Grey County?
Right now, we're just in the process of going through all the townships in Grey County, and our last one is with the upper tier municipality. So we're slowly getting there.
The reason why I ask, and maybe Georgian Bluffs planner can correct me if I'm wrong. In most of our rural areas in Georgian Bluffs, we follow the Grey County official plan as the guideline. And so I'm just wondering, that might be a place where this information may be a better place. Jen, are you available to make a comment?
Yep. Yes, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. Severance applications are processed under the County of Grey official plan, so that is definitely a good place to make this presentation.
Thank you, Jen. Is there any other comments or questions for Wesley? Well, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Wilson, for coming, and it was a great presentation.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you. So I'll move on to the agenda. Madam Clerk, my internet keeps cutting in and out, so just keep that in mind. I may catch up occasionally is what I'm trying to say. Okay, we'll move on with our delegations. We're down to, I hope I pronounce this properly, Greg, Climate Action Plan. We have one delegation registered to speak this evening regarding climate action planning. As a reminder to the resident, you will be provided 10 minutes to submit your comments. The clerk will provide you with 1 minute warning at the 9-minute mark should you need it. I now welcome Mr. Greg to speak. Mr. Greg, please go ahead. And I apologize for the pronunciation.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to give feedback. I know you have a packed agenda tonight, so I'll keep my talk short so that you have an opportunity for questions. And thank you to staff and council as well for this opportunity. You provided an opportunity for families like mine to show support and encouragement for the decisions you're faced with during budgeting this year, so thanks for being transparent. I will be brave and go ahead and share my slide deck. And I'll do you all a favor and turn off my own video to save my bandwidth so you don't have to look at my COVID haircut. So it appears the clerk has the slideshow as well. That's great. Thank you. Yes, so my name is Lee Grigg, and I'm a small business owner, and my wife's a family doctor in Wyerton. We have 3 kids here in Georgian Bluffs. Our family supports the recent climate planning taking place that I've seen in the YouTube recordings on the township website in order to create a Made in Georgia Bluffs plan for climate. I know all of our residents desire a township that's more resilient to severe weather, but there's cycles of flood and drought and global warming, there's climate refugees, there's all this bad stuff that you can get sick of listening to on the news. When our family and our group of neighbors in Georgian Bluffs hear that we as a township are taking the initial steps in planning for climate change, this gives us the hope and the optimism that we've been looking for in order to look our kids in the eye and tell them something's moving in the right direction for their future here in this community. Next slide, please. 2 years ago, I messaged our family friend Ann Schneider to ask if Georgia Bluffs had any projects that maybe our family could support, and hearing none, we met with our neighbors and we wanted to discuss the threat of climate change and maybe bring awareness to the issue. But at that first meetup with the neighbors, we learned from Ann that the new Georgian Bluffs strategic plan had listed point number 3 as a pillar, and it's demonstrate and enhance environmental stewardship. Point number 3 in the strategic plan. You're a step ahead of our family. So at that first meeting, we thought maybe we could just help volunteer for the township to make this more clear. And maybe we could suggest smart investments that we know will pay off for ratepayers in the near term. Acknowledging that counselors also sometimes need support, and township staff, they need volunteers. We also knew about a lot of local farm success stories that were also economic success stories. And in this journey, we discovered a few experts actually reside within our Georgian Bluffs boundary. So we contacted them to get involved. And once our neighbors realized that they weren't alone in their concerns, they offered to help us out as well. So I just present this to, I hope it demystifies the group of neighbors that we know as the Georgian Bluffs Climate Action Team. We have about 60 email addresses on file, and we get a regular turnout. I hope it genuinely shows that we're just here to support staff and council. That's the biggest takeaway from tonight's delegation. Despite having great people who know what they're doing, though, our group of volunteers can't be expected to create a relevant local climate plan. That requires a lot of analysis. So it also requires time from a consultant. And I trust CAO Al Menesis when he says we're able to invest in consulting with the small financial commitment that you're making in the 2021 budget. But more so, I know that with Al's ambition to go grant mining alongside our volunteers, you're going to find more sources of funding for a transition of municipal services that are more resilient and funding that doesn't require any burden on taxpayers. So that's good news, and we hope it's helpful for us to volunteer in this way. So today, I'm not coming to you with a message of this is how we do it, and I wish that we were that far along. I'm coming to you with a message of this is a learning opportunity for all of us, and we're happy to help. I think we also have an opportunity to engage with the local family farms here. After many discussions with farmers at farm gates over the years, we realize that there are a lot of financial and ecological stressors confronting our local farmers. And we as a climate action team want them to be invited to the table during this process because we all of us care about the land. We all care about our ability to feed our communities, and the climate action team that I represent stands united with family farms and believes that they're part of the solution to climate change. Now, the older generations care about the environment too. They did so before any of us. They had such a tiny impact on the planet because they I mean, they face it, they reuse their clothes over and over again. And when they wanted to go to the store to get a snack, they didn't hop in a big car, they walked or they bicycled. So keep all this in mind. And if we don't create a locally made climate plan in Georgian Bluffs, we're likely to be handed one down from a climate, like a county or a province. And that'll be like hammering a square peg into a round hole. Our township doesn't have a downtown, as you know. And our farm gates, they have little cash boxes for neighbors on the honor system. So we need people from Kemble at the table to figure out climate change and how it affects us, not people from the city. Next slide, please. Now, Al's CAO, Al Meneses' presentation made it clear there's funding opportunities to offset all the taxpayer burden. I won't get into them here, but I will happily take questions. But we, the Georgian Bluffs Climate Action Team, we're volunteering. And we want to help the CAO's office in their quest for mining for grants. Now, I'm sure alongside ourselves and alongside our farming community, the CAO's office can identify which grants come with which conditions, which makes the most sense. And to sum up, as you know, we're bordered by South Bruce Peninsula, and we're bordered by Owen Sound, two communities whose respective councils are putting off these issues until some future time when they, as representatives, may or may not be around. They're avoiding the tough decisions because they're unsure what to do. Next slide, please. But if you look one community beyond Owen Sound and South Bruce in either direction, you'll see North Bruce Peninsula, Meaford, West Grey Highlands, and they're all taking the initiative to invest in the future beyond the next election cycle. I'm sympathetic to your challenges of staff and council, mayor, deputy mayor, especially the challenge of investing in a local climate plan. But these communities around us are empathetic. They're going through this education part right now, all the easy ways to cut back on or suck up carbon emissions. And they're getting caught up on all this new science that as we speak, because it's coming out fast and furious. And it is hard to keep up. Now, Deputy Mayor Carlton would be able to speak to these nuances from her experiences in the Grey County Council. You can please ask her questions and listen to the context that she can provide regionally. And please listen to your CAO, who's bringing ideas of funding streams and these investments, and even I heard sustainable tourism or branding. From watching it on YouTube, I've also seen CAO Meneses already advocating for our stakeholders. And so why not have the family farmer at the table to help make this planning more relevant? Maybe we can figure out a way to get more incentives to them. And please listen to your colleagues, Councillor Coburn and Deputy Mayor Carlton, who are doing leadership training so that they can fully understand how climate action can provide us with funding. And please listen to our volunteers on your committee of council, whose key takeaway so far is to create your own climate plan and gain access to FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities funding, and then looking at all your line items through a climate lens. But last of all, please continue on your own positive momentum in addressing climate change, because it goes towards ensuring resiliency of our homes and our farms, our food, our landscapes, our shorelines, our watershed. A local climate plan made in Georgian Bluffs with stakeholders at the table from our communities. It's a really important investment to my family and to the group of neighbors known as the Georgian Bluffs Climate Action Team. And I'll yield the rest of my 10 minutes so that hopefully you can email Keith Reed at Gray Ag Services or Brenda at the Gray office of the NFU, the National Farmers Union, and you can ask them if it's really true that small family farms can benefit from climate planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's just a bundle of energy and so on. It's great to see that in a volunteer. Does council have any comments or questions at this time? Mr. Menez, Mr. CEO, any comments from you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for the presentation and the offer of assistance. And I'm a strong believer in really utilizing the strengths of our community and having engaged residents. I think council makes the most informed decisions based on the level of engagement that our residents sort of demonstrate. And don't be surprised if we reach out to you in terms of some assistance that you're volunteering. I think that would be a great idea. I mean, we're looking for always opportunities, and one of the things that we don't have a lot of is resources at the township in regards to doing a lot of research and a lot of that time-consuming sort of heavy lifting, so that we know exactly where to go with some initiatives. And so the offer of assistance will be greatly appreciated, and don't be surprised if we lean on you shortly. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Thanks, Hal. Welcome, Deputy Mayor Carlton and Councillor Thompson. I guess if there's no other questions, I'm going to Climate Action Committee Chair have the last comment. I'd like to put you on the spot.
I'm assuming you're putting me on the spot, Mr. Mayor, but you were breaking up. So when you say the words "put you on the spot," I'm just going to assume from now on you mean me. Thank you. Lee, thank you very much for your words this evening. It is refreshing to hear ratepayers come forward, not just with problems, but with solutions, and further the offer of willing help. So we appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Councillor Colburn and Lee. Great presentation, and be sure we will take you up on your great ambition. If there's no other questions, then I think I'll move on with the agenda. Seeing none, we are down to the consent agenda. Is there any member of council wish to pull any item? Councillor Colburn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wonder if I could pull item 9.3.4, please.
Okay. Is there any other agendas that any other items someone would like to pull? See none? The recommendation is that the Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs adopt the consent agenda for information as circulated, less item 9.3.4. Someone to move, put it on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Thompson. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Sutherland is absent. Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Carries.
Thank you. So we'll deal with item 9.3.4. Councillor Colburn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the rest of council. This is a resolution in support of universal sick days. We've all seen how important this issue is, particularly in light of the pandemic. And I would just ask that council consider putting forth a similar resolution.
So, Councillor Colburn, you would bring a notice of motion forward for that effect?
Sure. Yes.
Sorry, Madam Clerk, it cut out and I'm not sure what the response was.
Councillor Coburn provided a notice of motion in support of the motion for presentation at the next meeting of council.
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. So moving on the agenda, we're down to correspondence. Annual water summary report. Mr. Domer, you want to respond to this? Steve, are you there?
Yeah, yes, I am. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. This report is based on the 4 water treatment plants we have within the Georgian Bluffs area. It's basically an annual report that has to come to council and is available for the public to review in regards to our water applications and stuff throughout the Township of Georgian Bluffs. Currently, right now, all 4 water treatment plants have received a 100% rating over the last year for no issues or concerns that were brought forward. So this is just for your information, and it's available for the public to read if they are interested in grabbing the data from it.
Thank you, Steve. And I noticed that we got full 100% compliance on all issues.
That is correct. We are 100% compliance with everything on all 4 plants.
That's great. So I see no hands coming up from council. So it's great to see that coming. So I'll move forward with our agenda. We're down to committee reports. We have I'll read the motion I have before me, and then I'll turn it over to the treasurer. Whereas the Biodigester Joint Board of Management received and approved the 2021 draft budget at their meeting on March 12, 2021, and whereas the Joint Board recommended by Resolution B10-2021-03 that both representative councils approved the 2021 budget as presented. Therefore, the Township of Georgian Bluffs hereby approves the 2021 budget for the Biodigester Joint Board of Management as presented. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Second. Madam Treasurer, you want to speak to this? Cassie?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this budget was presented to the Joint Board of Management back in March, and to be officially approved, it needs to be approved by both Chatsworth and Georgian Bluffs Council. So we did go through the biodigester budget as part of our overall budget presentation, and what we are looking for tonight is for council to formally approve the budget being presented for the biodigester. I will note that capital works have been proposed, but approving the budget tonight does not approve those projects to take forward or to move forward. So for those projects, what will have to happen is an RFP process. And then at that time, the board and Georgian Bluffs Council and Chatsworth Council respectively can decide to move forward or not with those projects. I know that is a concern for council at this time to invest capital funds into that facility without having a clear direction or business plan going forward. So staff are not proposing to start those projects right now. We are waiting for that feasibility study to come back from Aqua, and then we will discuss moving forward with those capital projects.
Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Well, I still have you. When will that feasibility study come back? Can you state a date yet, or?
I would like to refer that question to Steve, please.
Steve, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, both reports are scheduled. The one report's scheduled to be back for end of April, and then the feasibility study is going to be back at the end of May and presented to council.
Thank you, Steve. Again, thank you, Madam Treasurer. Does council have any questions of the treasurer on this motion before us? Madam Clerk, I do not believe I see anybody. Okay, Madam Clerk, there's no comments. Would you, Councillor Barfoot?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to, I guess, Cassie and Steve. If I'm to understand you correctly, we are not getting the feasibility study until the end of April, and then the other study is due the end of May. I find it shocking that all these studies, our budget is being held up waiting for this and waiting for that. I don't know. I'm just not real happy with that.
Was that the end of your comment, Councillor Barfoot?
That's it.
Okay, okay, thank you. Madam Treasurer, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Barfoot. Tonight, we would be, with the passing of this motion, we would be approving the biodigester budget. So the study is not holding up moving forward with that budget. What it is holding up is investing capital works. So we are still moving forward with completing the biodigester budget.
Thank you, Cassie. Is there any other questions from council? Councillor, I don't see any. Madam Clerk, would you take the vote, please?
Oh, sorry, Dwight. Councillor Coburn did have her hand up.
Oh, Councillor Colburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Cassie. Actually, my question was well answered by our Director of Finance. It was in regards to the budget that's being presented tonight, reflecting sort of a status quo for the biodigester, and future decisions regarding capital work or mothballing will come when those two studies arrive at our desks. So thank you, Cassie, for clarifying that.
Thank you, Councillor Colburn. And Madam Clerk, for some reason or other, it must be the good weather. My computer is just going snaky. So if I miss somebody, please point out. Do I see Councillor Barfoot, your hand up again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam Treasurer, did I understand you to say by approving this motion, it's actually approving the budget for the biodigester?
Correct. If council passes this motion tonight and then it is ratified by council next week, and the clerk can correct me, then yes, you are approving the bio budget, but it is also subject to Chatsworth's approval.
Thank you very much, Cassie. I appreciate that. I just wanted to be very clear on what we're doing.
Thank you, Councillor Barfoot. See no other hands or questions. Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
Opposed?
Kathy Moore Coburn.
For.
Councillor Sutherland is absent. Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on for agenda, we're down to staff reports. Prior to considering our staff reports this evening, I would like to welcome planning students Maria Ganova, Thomas Freeman, and Mantino Fortino of Washington University. On behalf of council and staff, thank you for your effort in drafting the reports for our consideration this evening. I'll first go with, I have a recommendation here that report PL 2021-17 official plan update cannabis policy be received for information. Someone to move it, put on the floor, please. Moved by Deputy Mayor Carlton, second by Councillor Colburn. Maria, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm a placement student from Ryerson University's School of Urban and Regional Planning. I've been lucky to learn from the senior planner, Jen Burnett, over the course of the last few months. I'm aware that the township is undergoing an official plan policy update, and I've prepared a background report regarding cannabis operations. Next slide, please. Today, I will be presenting some of the key findings from my research that are further expanded on in the background report. I will go over the different responsibilities and jurisdictional capacities between the different levels of government, what cannabis can look like in different contexts in the municipality, the difference between medical and recreational cannabis, and provide an overview of the planning recommendations in the report. For context, the map in this slide depicts the municipalities that have opted in and out of permitting retail sales in their municipalities in the vicinity of the township. Okay, next slide, please. Since the passing of Bill C-45, the Cannabis Act legalized cannabis use for non-medical purposes across Canada in 2017. The legislation thoroughly addresses both federal and provincial responsibilities. However, municipal responsibilities are not directly addressed. This table illustrates a summary of municipal responsibilities based on my interpretation of legislation, a report set out by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and responsibilities identified by the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario, the AGCO. They are currently the authority for regulating cannabis retail. So municipalities are able to enforce using zoning. They have the capacity to establish whether retail is or is not allowed based on a resolution passed by January 2019. They are able to enforce building codes, enforce regulations around public consumption. They can establish smoking restrictions in public spaces and are able to use zoning bylaws to regulate public nuisances such as odor, lighting, and noise. They're also able to establish municipal workplace safety guidelines and municipal cost considerations relating to local policing. The legislation does state, however, that municipalities are not allowed to designate cannabis retail sales as separate land uses and may not create licensing systems respecting cannabis sale since one already exists. The report further outlines these tools and what other municipalities have done to regulate these operations. Next slide, please. Cannabis facilities and the variety of operations that they are permitted to do under federal licenses can make it difficult for municipalities to assign a land use to these activities. To address the cannabis in settlement areas, specifically in regards to retail, since the township has opted out, there's no retail stores for sale of cannabis permitted. However, cultivation is a challenging land use since the federal licenses to cultivate are based on production scale and have licensing requirements set out by Health Canada. Recreationally, each residence can grow 4 plants for personal use. However, to restrict larger cultivation facilities, setbacks are key and can define settlement areas as sensitive land uses per the policies outlined in the provincial policy statement. The current municipal practices illustrate that cannabis cultivation is assigned different land uses by different municipalities, which permits these activities under land uses ranging from agricultural to even industrial designations. Notably, the Grey County official plan permits cannabis activities under the agricultural land use type. Next slide, please. Recreational and medical cultivation and use of cannabis are subject to different rules. While recreational cannabis is in part governed by provincial governments, medical cannabis is exclusively regulated by the federal government, specifically Health Canada. The main differences between recreational and medical use of cannabis are related to the quantity allowances for public possession and personal production and growth. The permitted number of plants for personal recreational use is 4 plants per household or residence, while for medicinal purposes, the cultivation varies based on the medical prescription and whether it is grown indoors or outdoors. The first image illustrates the size of potential cannabis plants cultivated outdoors. However, the sizes range in terms of height and width and scale based on the plant type and growing conditions. The second image illustrates a crop yield for the 4 plants legally allowed to be grown for recreational use. This yield is nearly 8 pounds for dried cannabis. The extent of cannabis policies is further set out in the report. Next slide, please. By taking into account the history of cannabis legislation in Canada, the relevant policies and planning framework of cannabis operations, and the current municipal practices in Ontario, applying this information can allow for more informed decision-making. The following planning recommendations are provided for Council to consider when creating cannabis operations policies. So firstly, accurate definitions are important when creating a zoning bylaw to regulate activities associated with cannabis operations, specifically defining the cannabis facilities in terms of scale, land use type, scale and land use type can limit the negative impacts associated with these operations. Likewise, defining settlement areas as sensitive land uses can provide an additional separation between the uses. Next, the issues and nuisances caused by cannabis cultivation can be addressed using community standards bylaws. So external municipal practices point to the fact that municipalities across Ontario are trying to mitigate some of these impacts of cultivation, and the report further outlines bylaws related to odor, lighting, and noise concerns. Thirdly, based on the licensing requirements set out by Health Canada, the potential issues that can occur with cannabis operations can be regulated using site plan requirements. Finally, an interim control bylaw is a tool that municipalities across Ontario are using to study the potential impacts and opportunities associated with cannabis operations. Next slide, please. In conclusion, it is recommended that this report is received for informational purposes, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Maria, for an excellent report. Just amazing. Jen, do you want to make any comments before I ask Council for comments or questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to open the floor up to Council. Any comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, excellent report, very well written and quite easy to read. Just a question, in the one part you commented about Grey County allows cultivation under agricultural. Does that supersede anything that we would put in our own township plan, or can we put something different in?
So, one second. I'm just pulling up what they wrote. The Grey County 2018 official plan was set out prior to addressing cannabis production and cultivation. They permit marijuana and cannabis uses under the agricultural land use type, considering the growth of agriculture. So the plan considers the different activities and the different cannabis licenses permitted, and the township would have to adhere to what the upper tier municipality.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you. That makes sense. Okay.
And just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor, if I may, the county official plan applies to the agricultural and rural areas of the township. So that's the plan that we follow for those areas. For settlement areas, we could have, we wouldn't allow for cultivation in a settlement area because we don't have farmland. So that's another consideration.
Thanks, Jen. Councillor Coburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the report, Ms. Godova. Very much appreciated. Thorough and really easy to understand, so we appreciate that. Between yourself and our senior planner, what direction do you recommend we go then? I was most curious about the interim bylaw. I know I have spoken to the planning department and the CAO regarding some zoning considerations, but also a nuisance bylaw, but I hadn't considered the potential for an interim bylaw. Is that something that you would recommend until we can do something a little more permanent to help with the issues in the settlement areas? That's my first question, and sorry to be verbose. I wonder too if I could ask Maria, did your research include any connections with municipalities who have been tackling the nuisance bylaw, and has enforcement been an issue? Thank you.
Maria, want to answer that? Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to address the interim control bylaw question, so this tool is temporary. It's used to freeze development and applications related to cannabis for a certain land use type for 1 year with a possible 1-year extension. And it's used to study the potential impacts of these facilities on, for example, settlement areas. However, it's temporary until a more permanent solution. And to address your second comment, there are municipalities that have used a community bylaw, such as the town of Mono, and they haven't mentioned anything about enforcement of the bylaw. However, I have watched a different meeting from East Gwillimbury where it is difficult to understand what's legal and what's not, because it's a very confusing process, even for the police to understand what are their rights as far as licensing goes. It's regulated by Health Canada.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering what our next steps as a council should be. So we have a wonderful report with lots of good recommendations. How does council see us moving forward with this? Is the next step to solidify some kind of a plan regarding a temporary bylaw, which I understand is correct me if I'm wrong, but like a moratorium on further approval of those establishments for a year until we can get more of our ducks in a row? Just wondering what next steps are.
I'm going to turn that over to the senior planner first. Go ahead, Jen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So through you to council, staff will be able to bring back a report for consideration at a committee of the whole meeting and for discussion, and looking for direction on how council, exploring some options, and just to see how council would like to proceed to move forward with both the cannabis issue as well as short-term accommodation policies.
Thanks, Jen.
Based on the findings of these reports.
You. Before I go to Deputy Mayor Carlton, Mr. CAO, any comments?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. No, I support the comments from the planner. I think the report on the cannabis was comprehensive. It'll serve as a foundational piece for us to build on. It was countless hours of research, obviously, that are going to be invaluable for us. And as the planner moves forward with a report and as staff bring a report forward in terms of next steps for the township, we're going to use all of that research and those recommendations and benchmarking that Maria did to our benefit for sure. So that I would assume would be our next steps.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Deputy Mayor Carlton, did I see your hand up?
Yes, you did. Just a question about, I have heard that we have an existing grow-op in a residential area, so with some complaints from neighbors. So what can be done there? Do they just automatically get grandfathered in, or are we able to put some restrictions in place in that?
Who wants to take that, Jen?
Yeah. So what we really need to do is follow the bylaw enforcement complaint process, where we actually have a complaint logged with the township, so we can examine that complaint, and from that, then if it's an existing operation, we probably if I'm not sure if Tim's on the line and he'd like to speak to it, but maybe have some communication with the OPP. We don't have any record of their license. We have not been notified that they've been granted a license to operate in the township, so we would have to explore that further.
Thanks, Jen. Tim, are you on the line? Do you want to make any comments? Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tim, I would just remind you that you are muted. However, in the meantime, I just want to remind council that you did provide direction to staff to investigate implementation of a nuisance bylaw, specifically to address nuisances related to lighting and odor, etc. That is on our outstanding items list to be addressed within the second quarter.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Tim, are you unmuted now? No. If Tim can't get unmuted, we'll move forward. Is there any other comments from council? Before I ask for the vote on the motion before us, Maria, thank you very much for an excellent report. Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Sutherland is absent. Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our agenda. We're down to short-term accommodations. I have a recommendation here that report PL 2021-18 official plan update short-term accommodations be received for information. Someone's moved to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Pringle. Mr. Thomas Freeman, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I'm happy to share my research on short-term accommodations. I believe the clerk will be sharing the screen. Yep. So my name is Thomas Freeman. I'm a fourth-year urban planning student at Ryerson University, and over the past several months, I've been researching short-term accommodations in the Township of Georgian Bluffs. If you could move to the second slide, please.
Madam Clerk, there's nothing moving on my screen.
Apologies, bear with me for one moment here.
Okay, I think you can all see the question there on the second slide. So what is a short-term accommodation? A short-term accommodation is a private residential dwelling that is rented to provide accommodations to a person or persons on a temporary basis by way of concession, permit, lease, license, rental agreement, or similar commercial arrangement for a period of less than 30 days. Short-term accommodations do not include bed and breakfast establishments, hotels, motels, lodges, or other commercially zoned accommodation uses for the traveling public. Short-term accommodations are typically listed on sites like Airbnb and Vrbo. These companies don't think of themselves as traditional accommodations, but as provider for home sharing. This new type of accommodation has become a popular option for both travelers and homeowners, as it provides relatively inexpensive options for travelers and a source of extra income for homeowners. Next slide, please. Currently, there are approximately 34 active short-term accommodations throughout the township. The majority of these are cottages and houses for rent along the shoreline of Georgian Bay, as well as rural properties throughout the township. The majority of these rentals are entire houses or cottages, which are typically 2 to 3 bedrooms, accommodating a family, about a 4 to 6 person family. Several rentals are private rooms rented out to provide accommodation for an individual or couple. Next slide, please. Over the past 3 years, the number of short-term accommodations has been relatively stable, peaking around 80 during the summer and early fall. This trend is relatively stable, and but this winter is lower than average due to the impact of COVID-19. However, the summer rental season was not affected. Next slide, please. Through an analysis of best practices across Ontario, there are 3 options for municipalities can take to regulate short-term accommodations. The first option is a do-nothing approach. While many municipalities have yet to adopt a regulatory framework, some have deliberately chosen to do nothing. The City of Orillia is one such example, where they chose to do nothing due to the low number of short-term accommodations and the relatively few formal complaints received. Orillia has a similar number of short-term accommodations as Georgian Bluffs and has only received complaints regarding 8 properties, which were dealt with using existing bylaws and enforcement. The second option is to completely ban short-term accommodations. Few municipalities have chosen this option. This is typically done in suburban communities where there is little interest in tourism and there was fear that short-term accommodations would negatively affect the supply of long-term rentals. The third option is to regulate short-term accommodations through zoning, licensing, and taxes. Many municipalities are choosing to regulate short-term accommodations by requiring hosts to register or even license their properties with the municipality. Some municipalities, such as the Blue Mountains, are using zoning provisions to only allow short-term accommodations in specific areas of the municipality. Other municipalities are imposing a municipal accommodation tax. This is designed to level the playing field between traditional hotel accommodations and short-term accommodations. The rate is typically 4% of the rental price, and the money goes to the administration and enforcement costs associated with regulating short-term accommodations. Next slide, please. Compared to other municipalities, Georgian Bluffs has relatively few short-term accommodations and has received few complaints. As you can see on page 6 of my report, the cost to regulate and license short-term accommodations are significant. A robust regulatory scheme may not be worth the additional cost given the limited number of complaints received. I am recommending this report be received for information. If council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Thomas. A great report. There. Now I can see everybody. I'll open the floor up to council for questions or comments. Madam Clerk, I do not see anyone. Do you see any comments from council? I should say, Jen, do you have any comments? Senior Planner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did notice that Councillor Colburn had her hand up.
Councillor Colburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I just wanted to thank Thomas for the presentation. I was particularly interested in the data around the number of complaints and the fact that it's involving a very few number of accommodations. So that helps us to make decisions moving forward, and I think that that's an important piece of data that maybe we didn't have before. So thank you.
Jen, go ahead. Any comments?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor, but I see that Councillor Pringle does have his hand up.
Yeah. Okay, I won't go to you again, Senior Planner. Go ahead, Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There, yeah, that was a great report, Thomas. There, and actually, Councillor Colburn there did bring up a very valid point. This is actually what I was going to reiterate too. There, that the fact that we have such a low amount of complaints in Georgian Bluffs and we don't have that many units out there, should really make us wonder how far we really want to push the envelope on this. But with 5 complaints in the township, that's not really a whole lot. So anyway, great report, and I appreciate your time doing it.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Councillor Bradford, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for a most informative report. There's a couple things I want to point out. One complaint that I had was the fact that the owner of the property does not live within the municipality. They live in a bigger urban municipality than we're in. What was particularly disturbing to them was during this COVID, there was at one time there was as high as 12 people renting this residence, which is directly across the road from the ratepayer I'm speaking of. Their concern was that there was no consideration given to them as a homeowner. And I find that hard to take. During a COVID, and we know the rates of COVID cases in the area that we come from, and yet these people, they come up, they're in town, they're out of town, they're walking around. That was a concern. And I don't think, be it 5 or be it 50, we should have more consideration for our people. It's okay to let it go, and then next thing you know, it's out of control. The other one I got was from a lady, and sorry, Mr. Mayor, was from a lady, and she said the house next door to her had been rented out years as a bed and breakfast. I don't understand why B&B is not considered or is not included in that. But as she said, you never knew who was next door to you. She said, do you think I enjoy my property? No, if it was next door to me, I would be a little concerned about my safety too. So, first, another thing that concerns me is, are their facilities adequate? We'll take, for example, septic systems. I was online looking at some of the places that were advertised as short-term or whatever you want to call it. Are their septic systems adequate? We don't have. Maybe we should look a little bit further. Maybe we should have a septic system bylaw that you have to have your septic system checked every so many years. That was put before council years ago, but nothing ever happened to it. Oh, it's not our problem. Just let it go away. So, I guess maybe I've been around too long and I'm hearing more and more of these complaints. But if you want to talk to these people, by all means, I'll give every one of your phone numbers to these people. I think some of these people have very valid concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Barfoot, for your comments. Jen, do you want to comment any of that? Or Thomas? I don't want to put Thomas on the spot, so that's why I was going to the senior planner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I believe, Tim is actually the in charge of making sure that septic systems are reviewed. So I believe they're through the, I think it's the Source Water Protection Plan. So the Risk Management Office works with the chief building officials in the area to schedule inspections and ensure compliance of septic systems to make sure they're working properly in the township. So I know that a couple of years ago we had a number of properties around one of the lakes that were looked at, and to check the septic systems to see where they are. So there is a program in effect that where we look at the health and age of the septic systems. And so that's something that is done on a rotating basis throughout the township. With regards to having and being able to regulate who comes into your neighborhood, I don't know that any municipality has that power. So I understand the concerns that are raised by the residents that live in proximity to properties that are used for short-term accommodation rentals. However, the municipality doesn't have any powers right now to control who walks down someone's street. So we get a lot of visitors to the area, and people who come up for day trips and enjoy the sitting on the shore road allowance and accessing the beach. And but there is a responsibility for a property owner to be aware of who's renting their home. I'm sure Thomas can speak to some of the criteria. So when you list your property on one of the listings, you're required to state the maximum limit of people that the property can be rented to, and there are criteria that the owners have to meet to be able to continue to list those properties. Thomas, did you want to speak a little further on that, or have I covered it?
Yeah, you did cover most of it. In terms of septic system, there wasn't too much difference between if someone was using that property for themselves or whether they were renting it to individuals, because the amount of bedrooms and the amount of bathrooms doesn't change. It's as long as they're using the occupancy for the right for what's stated in the building code, there's no issue in terms of overloading the septic system. That was one thing that I did find in my research.
Thank you, Thomas. Councilor Barfoot, you have a follow-up question?
Maybe I should say I was in real estate up here 28 years, so you can't tell me a lot about septic system on waterfront properties. And I'm not suggesting, I think for you or for Jen to suggest that I want to block everybody from walking down the street, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying this is getting out of hand. We have hotels, motels that are paying commercial taxes, and yet somebody can come in with what was built to be a certain size of septic, and yet there were bedrooms put in on the lower level. I'm not saying everybody's dishonest. What I'm saying is, if we are aware of a problem, which I did bring it to the township's attention, and it was, you might as well have patted me on the head and said, go home, little girl. Well, I'm not, because I represent the ratepayers. And when I have ratepayers that are saying to me that they got neighbors that are coming up from the city and having parties and going here and going there, I don't know.
Thank you, Councilor Barfoot. Mr. CEO, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only comment I'll say is the comments that we've heard from council are duly heard, and when we come forward with some additional reports on this matter, all those thoughts will be put into the report for consideration as we move forward. It's a difficult situation for sure. I mean, I would love it if the province would allow a classification where what is now currently zoned residential or assessed as residential, if they are using it for short-term rentals, that maybe it becomes classified as a business and we can get some additional revenues to help offset some of the enforcement costs and things of that sort. But that's something that the province has to allow us that ability to change that assessment so that we can at least have an opportunity to recoup some of our costs from an enforcement perspective. But comments are well noted, and we will take them all into consideration as we move forward.
Thank you, Al. Councilor Barfoot, your hand is still up. Do you have another comment, or?
No, go ahead.
Sorry, Madam Clerk, I did not get that.
Councillor Barfoot has no further questions.
Okay, thank you. Is there no other comments from council? I'll ask Madam Clerk to take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot,
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn,
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland is absent. Councillor Ryan Thompson,
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle,
Or,
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
Or,
and Mayor Dwight Burley.
4.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on for agenda, we're down to our next recommendation. The report PL 2021-19 official plan update, affordable housing, inclusively zoning be received for information. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Coburn, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. And I believe Manito Fortino is going to speak to this, and I apologize for not pronouncing your name properly. Please go ahead.
Thank you, everyone. It's no problem, Mayor. We'll just wait for the slide. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mateo Fortino. I'm a fourth-year student at the School of Urban and Regional Planning at Ryerson University. This is my final semester before I graduate. Today, I will give a short presentation, which acts as a summary for the report Jen helped me make. The report itself has much more detailed information on this topic. As you can see, this topic is titled Official Plan Policy Update for Inclusionary Zoning. So the report includes all the information I thought was important to make the recommendations about how Georgian Bluffs could update their official plan in regards to inclusionary zoning. Today, I will just be explaining the things that I found most important on this topic while I've worked on it the last few months. So first off, I wanted to start off by explaining what inclusionary zoning is. And basically in the Planning Act, they say that municipalities in their official plans can contain policies that authorize inclusionary zoning. And this is described as prescribing affordable housing units within buildings and projects, and that affordable housing units be maintained as such over a period of time. However, this can be interpreted differently. For example, Gray County, they don't require anything. They want 30% of all new housing added to be considered affordable. But in my opinion, the main way inclusionary zoning is used is by creating the conditions that would appeal to developers to build affordable units. This involves incentivizing them, offering grants, using community improvement plans, which have the power to waive certain fees and related costs to make residential developments more affordable. By introducing bylaws that support affordable housing, an example is removing the minimum housing size requirement, which I think is done in Georgian Bluffs. But other than that, I think there are a lot of barriers against affordable housing in Georgian Bluffs. I say that because for a town like this, I'd imagine most of the development applications you guys would see are for single detached houses in suburban neighborhoods. And so for a private developer to offer units to be affordable, they need to be financially justified. And building a detached house really doesn't support affordability. And so the picture on the right was taken from the Gray County website. They say they manage 997 rent geared to income units where tenants pay no more than 30% of their pre-tax income on rent. These properties are mostly for senior citizens. So the reason why I put this up here is because in my opinion, this is what affordable housing would look like in the majority of the county and in rural areas and suburbs. I'll get more into that in a few minutes though. I just thought it would be helpful if alongside explaining what inclusionary zoning is, I could give you an example of what it would eventually lead to. The next slide, please. So I've been using the word affordable housing and I think it's important to define it. Gray County basically uses the same definition that the province does. Affordable home ownership is when the purchase price of a house is 10% below what the market average is for that same type of property. And basically that mortgage and property taxes and utility fees do not exceed 30% of that household's pre-tax income. This is the same for rental housing. If the rent is 30% less than a household's pre-tax income for that month, then it's considered affordable. But really, what determines if a property is affordable or not is different from person to person and how much money they make. And I think it's really important for policymakers and public bodies to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, to look at trends and population statistics, because many people are in the same boat when it comes to being able to afford housing. So the graphic on the left was taken from the county. It shows who really needs affordable housing here. It's the low and middle income workers and their households. You know, it's people like farmhands, cooks, waiters and waitresses, truck drivers, construction workers, nurses, mechanics. The list goes on. And it's important to recognize that these kinds of people are the backbones of local economy, especially in rural areas and smaller towns. And so what's happening is that across Ontario, since the housing market has been so crazy for quite a while, average prices rise year over year, and people have to move farther and farther away to live in places that they can afford. In my report, I include an example of this on the first or second page. It's from a labor market study in 2018, and it found that in the South Georgian Bay, there was a labor shortage for over 800 tourism-related jobs, and this was linked to a shortage of affordable housing. And some points that this report brings up is that a lack of affordable housing can weaken the appeal a region has to attract new investment, and it can also weaken local businesses and cause economic growth to stagnate. Next slide, please. So this is what affordable housing could look like in the county. It's a combination of creating smaller lot sizes and smaller unit sizes to make living cheaper. There are a lot of ways this can be done, but secondary suites are probably the most effective way because they can be used in already existing neighborhoods. These graphics you see are examples of what a new development would look like. To attach a number to this will be 20 units a hectare. This is what the county identified as a density to support affordable housing. So a couple months ago, I interviewed a county planner who's involved with inclusionary zoning policies, and he told me that a lot of places in the county are reluctant to build denser developments like these examples. But what's important is that this is nothing new to the county. It's been done before. That picture on the left shows 20 units a hectare, and it was built in Owen Sound around 1910. In the report, I have another example over in Hanover. They have places 28 units a hectare built in the 1920s. So a lot of times when people hear the words affordable housing, they might think of, you know, those big social housing buildings. But the truth is that the type of density you see here supports affordable housing while maintaining the shape and character of your communities and suburbs. So in your official plan, you guys have a vision for what you want Georgian Bluffs to be. I'm just going to recite it. Georgian Bluffs is a community of communities which will preserve its agricultural and rural residential lifestyles, natural landscapes, heritage, and enhance business opportunities through fiscal planning and proactive planning. Our mission is to balance growth and our existing assets and lifestyles through responsible management and proactive planning. And I think that a lot of what I've been talking about these past few minutes embody this sort of vision that you guys put forward. Next slide, please. So now I'll make some recommendations that I have in the report. So I think that there needs to be more specific policies in the official plan. That affordable housing should have its own section under section 2.6, housing and population. So creating a separate section would help organize other policy recommendations in this report. Some of them are including a statement why affordable housing is important and the negative effects lack of affordable housing can have on the town. Adopting the housing first approach like other municipalities have done, where affordable housing developers are given first consideration for surplus lands in the town. The future use of a community improvement plan should be aimed at providing affordable housing, conducting an ongoing inventory of potential sites where affordable housing opportunities may exist, a statement about how affordable housing should be sought out in any future lands, especially those that become fully and publicly serviced in the future, including the county's target to try to achieve 30% of all new units added to be affordable. And also, I think a statement under section 2.5 livable economy, I think that a statement should be made about how affordable housing can help strengthen a local economy, because it serves a lot of workers in these businesses. So I think that there's a few more in my report, but these are the major ones. I don't think that the policies that require housing to be affordable will help. I think it will have an adverse effect and scare off potential developers. What I really think Georgian Bluffs needs to do is be in close contact with the county and potential affordable housing developers. And this relationship would create the conditions necessary to support affordable housing units, to identify and capture the incentives for this. For a complex issue such as this, I think that every municipality needs to play their part in cooperation with the county. That way, a countywide stock of affordable housing is built up over time. It is recommended that this report be received for information. That wraps up my presentation. Thank you for your time. I'm open to answering any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Fontino. Jen, any comments before I ask council questions? Seeing none, the floor is open to council. Deputy Mayor Carlton, go ahead.
I'm not sure, but maybe Jen had a comment to make there.
She was shaking her head.
Okay, thank you. Excellent report again, Mateo. Did you give consideration in the report as to where within the municipality we would put affordable housing? And how would, I guess part of what I'm thinking that goes hand in hand with affordable housing is transportation. So if people find a spot where they can afford to live, do they have the transportation to get, say, further into town, since the majority of our township is rural and they would be in the country needing transportation in?
So yeah, I do mention, I think East Linton is currently getting services upgraded so it can support housing. I think that's an opportunity to support affordable housing, and that would basically involve reviewing development applications for the site and approving those that make an agreement that say we will support affordable housing. As for transportation, given that this is a rural town, I don't think there's much opportunity to provide public transportation to these sites other than people owning a car. I think that's just the reality of living up there. That's all I have to say on that topic.
Thank you. Any other questions of the council? Seeing nothing, Madam Clerk, would you take the vote, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Sutherland is absent. Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Thank you again to our students for their efforts throughout this seminar. Your detailed reports will assist council as we move through the official plan update process. Best of luck in your future endeavors. And again, thank you very much. Great reports from all three of you. Thank you. So of council, we'll move forward then with our agenda. We are down to sidewalk relocation. I have a recommendation here that report OPS 2021-16 sidewalk relocation Cobble Beach be received, and that the proposed sidewalk relocation on Cobble Beach Drive be approved. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Pringle, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Steve, Director of Operations, you want to comment?
Yeah, so we have received a request from Colo Beach to relocate the sidewalk that is on the south side of Colo Beach Drive, and they would like to relocate it to the north side of the road there, where we have a lot of extra space and availability for a proper sidewalk to be reinstalled as per the Ontario standards and also to the AOD standards as well. This is going to be no cost to the township. They are also going to be repainting some lines across the road to show that the walkers to go across to the other side of the road instead of them where they're going to stop. So this is just a report for council to approve for the relocation of the sidewalk.
Thank you, Steve. Comments or questions for council? Seeing none, Steve, a question for the mayor on the crosswalk. I'll go to the Deputy Mayor Carlton in a second. I'm going to supersede you. Steve, a question on the I'm going to call a crosswalk where the traffic is coming. The pedestrians will walk across the road. I realize it's not fully developed down there now. Will there have to be extra cautions put in future, or is that necessary?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Mayor, we will be putting up some signage as well to show that there are pedestrian crossing there so that people are fully aware when they are coming around the corner so that they do see that we do have a walkway in the area.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Deputy Mayor Carlton, your hand was up.
Yes, it was. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question. When I was looking at the maps that you supplied in the report, I couldn't actually tell if the sidewalk is in existence already on the south side or if they're just proposing to, when they install it, put it on the north side.
So the sidewalk is currently existing on the south side of the road there. With the new houses being built, they're going to build right on top of the existing sidewalk because the property line is right there. So with the relocation to the north side, we'll be able to help us with the snow storage as well when we do the winter maintenance in the area. But then the same point too is we won't be dumping snow into people's the sliding doors back there. So they will be removing that existing sidewalk, resodding it the way it's supposed to be, and then reinstalling on the north side.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions from council or comments? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Paul Sutherland is absent. Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
Or
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So we are now down to public question period. Madam Clerk, was there any member of the public registered with you for comments?
There is not.
Okay. Moving on for agendas, we're down to bylaws. Our first recommendation is that bylaw 2021-23 being a bylaw to remove certain lands from part lot control in the Township of Georgian Bluffs be read first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Colburn. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion as presented. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore-Coburn.
For.
Councillor Sutherland is absent. Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
or
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. Moving on to our last bylaw. The recommendation is that bylaw 2021-25 being a bylaw to adopt level of service policy OPS 2021-02 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed the seal of the corporation, and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put it on the floor, please. Moved by Councilor Pringle, second by Deputy Mayor Carlton. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion. Councillor Carol Barfoot,
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn,
For.
Councillor Sutherland is absent. Councillor Ryan Thompson,
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle,
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton,
For.
and Mayor Viperly.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you. We're down to unfinished business. We have none. New business, we have none. Does any member?
Apologies, Mr. Mayor, I had added something to new business.
I'm sorry, I forgot that. I can't read my writing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as I mentioned earlier, staff have been considering how the recently announced stay-at-home order will impact the township. As you are all aware, we formerly were under a provincial shutdown prior to tomorrow or I guess tonight at 12:01. So following these orders coming into effect, some changes will be implemented at the township. The first being that the township administration offices will be closed to the public. Currently, we are open to facilitate.
Madam Clerk, may I interrupt, please? I see Councilor Thompson put his hand up. Councilor Thompson?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I actually put my hand up. I'm interrupting now, which I apologize for. I actually put my hand up because I do have a new item, and I'm sorry I missed the start of the meeting. So after the clerk is done, I would, if it pleases the council, I have another item.
Okay. Sorry, Madam Clerk, go ahead.
No problem. So as I was saying, prior to these measures being implemented, which again will come into effect this evening, being 12:01 a.m. tomorrow, April 8th, the township administration offices were formally open for collection of payments and appointments with staff only. That will change effective this evening at 12:01, again, April 8th at 12:01. The township office will be closed to the public, including for collection of payments. For the most part, all payment collection opportunities are available on the website through an electronic format now, including those associated with the annual Balmy Beach Key licensing program. So a couple of things to highlight as they are of particular public interest. One, garbage bags will be waived effective tomorrow at 12:01 throughout the remainder of the shutdown to encourage our public to remain at home per the order. Secondly, as I mentioned, Balmy Beach boat launch keys. As we all know, this is a popular item when we get into the summer season. That is now available through an online permitting process. You can also pay the annual fee. Following completion of the application, a boat launch key will be mailed to the specific purchasers at their provided address. Further, all council meetings will continue to be held virtually through the shutdown. And additionally, we want to highlight for the public, as the April 24th tax installment date is looming, there are available options to pay those fees both online, being electronic banking, through check to the Dropbox, or through our pre-authorized payment program. And all of these measures are currently posted on the website, will be shared on social media, and have been circulated to all local news outlets via a media release.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilor Coburn, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Brittany. Thanks for everything you do to keep us all on track with all of these changes. You must feel like a ball in a pinball machine sometimes. I do have a question about the boat launches. Sadly, I'm not even sure when we open those up, but how are the boat launches impacted right now with the current stay-at-home order? Or is that even an issue right now?
I don't think it's an issue, but Mr. CEO, you want to comment on that?
Sure, I can certainly try through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillors. I don't believe it's impacted at all. I believe it's still a possibility for people to go out and enjoy the outdoors. I think they need to do it responsibly and follow the health protocols. I know as staff, we are looking at the possibility of doing away with the keys altogether and doing an opportunity where payments will be completely online and things such as an option just as, you know, a key code would be provided to those who provide the payment and they'd be able to access the boat launch that way. We're trying to minimize the contact with staff and sort of touching different surfaces and everything. So once again, COVID is proving a bit of a challenge for us, but we're stepping up to the plate and trying to modernize our processes as much as we can. And this is one that we will likely modernize in the very near future to do away with the key requirement. But to the councillor's question, I do not believe that outdoor activities are impacted by the recent provincial order, with the exception being, I think there's a requirement or sort of a guideline to minimum how many people would be together if you're not in the same household. And so we don't want to see sort of people launching boats and having, 40 people get on a boat somewhere. So we're hoping that common sense will prevail, but we're doing our best.
Okay, thank you. Al, I guess I just asked because I know with the last shutdown a year ago, it did include boat launches. So I appreciate that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Colburn. Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one additional comment in regards to staffing at the township office. We did want to highlight that staff continue to be encouraged to work from home as much as possible. And we are all available to assist the public through virtual means, being telephone, video conferencing, whatever our public is most comfortable with.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm quite sure you and all the staff at Georgian Bluffs will do an excellent job, as always. Councillor Thompson, are you still there?
Still here. Happy to be here.
The floor is yours, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. So I just wanted to give everyone on council an idea to think about this and consider their involvement. So we are this is referring to the library board. So we may receive some communication before we receive the minutes of our last library meeting. So at the last library meeting, we discussed the expiring Owen Sound and North Grey Union Library Agreement. So what happens next is we will receive a letter to the office that they would like to strike a negotiating committee. And as you may or may not remember, this agreement is a 10-year agreement. So we're at the end of a 10-year agreement, and now we need to negotiate another one. So there will be a request for some members to join the negotiating team. So I wanted to give people some time to think about that and consider, I guess, A, who is interested, and B, how do we go about making that decision? So I didn't want anyone to feel surprised if they see that documentation comes before our minutes. So that was my comments, and I'm happy to answer any questions if people have them. Oops,
thank you.
I didn't mean to put my hand up.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Madam Clerk, I assume we'll look forward to that letter coming from the North Grey Library to Georgian Bluffs Council?
That's correct, yes. We have not yet received correspondence to that effect, but should we will include it for council's consideration.
Okay, and then at that time, then we would have a discussion and pick a committee to sit on that negotiating committee. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Councillor Thompson?
It tests my, oh my goodness, sorry here. It tests my memory recall, but I feel like the negotiating committee is prescribed. I think last time it was 2 members, but I'm not positive. So I believe it's 2 or 3 members that sit on the negotiating team, but we'll wait until we get the documentation or the request from them.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I'm quite sure our very efficient clerk will research that and tell us what we need. Now, Councillor Thompson, if you aren't going to put your hand up again or not,
I was actually just trying to get somebody to high five me back. That's why I kept doing that, but nobody wanted to.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So there's no other unfinished business. We're down to new business. We're down to notice of motions. Does any council member wish to provide a notice of motion for consideration at a future meeting of council? Councillor Colburn has one. Is there any other items? I do not see any, Madam Clerk. Am I correct? Okay. We have no closed session here tonight. We're down to our confirming bylaw. That bylaw 2021-26 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on April 7th, 2021 be read a first, second, third time, finally passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed the seal of the corporation and endorsed in the bylaw book. Someone to move to put on the floor, please. Moved by Councillor Barfoot, second by Councillor Colburn. Is there any discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, take the vote, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I call your name, please indicate whether you are for or against the motion. Councillor Carol Barfoot.
For.
Councillor Kathy Moore Coburn.
For.
Councillor Sutherland is absent. Councillor Ryan Thompson.
For.
Councillor Grant Pringle.
For.
Deputy Mayor Sue Carlton.
For.
And Mayor Dwight Burley.
For.
Thank you, and that carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council will meet again at a regular schedule on October, April 21st, 2021, 5 p.m. Committee of the Whole will meet on April 14th, 2021 at 5 p.m. As a reminder to both council and the public, a public meeting to consider motorized vehicles access at Sotacrity Heights Water Access Point has been scheduled for May 5th, 2021 at 5 p.m. All are welcome to join virtually upon registering with the Township Clerk. If there's no other discussions here tonight, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Pringle. Show of hands, all in favor to adjourn? Okay, that motion is carried. Thank you, everybody. We are now adjourned.